The cafe was loud enough that nobody paid attention to the man in the corner, the one with the worn laptop, the cold coffee, and the little girl drawing horses on a paper napkin beside him. Nobody paid attention to the boy at the next table either, hunched over a worksheet, his pencil barely moving, his chin dropping lower with every passing minute. Nobody paid attention to any of it, until the boy looked up, eyes glassy, and said the words that cut through every conversation in the room. Mom said no one would help me anymore. The man in the corner went still. He set down his cup. He looked at the boy. Then he looked at his daughter. And he made a decision that, in less than an hour, would unravel the careful, quiet life he had spent 5 years trying to build. Sebastian Cole did not look like someone with anything to hide. That was perhaps the point. He was 32 years old, lean from long hours and irregular meals, with dark eyes that moved a little too quickly across a room, and hands that stilled a little too completely when he was thinking. He had the kind of face that was easy to overlook, not unpleasant, not striking, just calm. The kind of calm that takes years to construct from something messier underneath. People who met him at the rideshare pickup thought he was quiet, maybe shy, certainly unremarkable. None of them thought to ask follow-up questions, which was more or less what he was after. He drove for a rideshare company during the day, 5 days a week, sometimes 6. On Tuesday and Thursday evenings, he picked up a second shift at a warehouse distribution center 3 miles from his apartment, loading pallets until midnight. He was not struggling exactly. He was managing. There was a difference, and Sebastian understood it clearly, even when other people did not. Managing meant the bills were paid. The refrigerator had what Chloe needed, and there was a small savings account that grew slowly, but grew. It was not wealth. It was not even comfort in any ambitious sense. But it was stable. And stability was the thing he had decided 5 years ago, and without apology, to build his life around. His daughter, Chloe, was 6 years old and believed wholeheartedly that horses could talk if you listened in exactly the right way. She had her father's dark eyes, and her late mother's laugh, wide and sudden, like a door thrown open. She drew horses constantly on napkins, on the backs of receipts, on the margins of Sebastian's old notebooks. She did not fully understand why they moved so often, or why her father sometimes went very quiet in the evenings, or why there were no photographs of certain years on the walls of their apartment. She was 6. She drew horses and trusted that her father would explain everything eventually. They came to the cafe every Thursday after he picked her up from school. It was a habit, small and reliable. One of the things Sebastian built his week around. He would order a black coffee and an orange juice, open his laptop, and spend 2 hours handling logistics for a small side project, a tutoring materials website he maintained for no income, but could not seem to let go of. Chloe would draw. Occasionally, she would ask him to look at a horse. He always looked. That particular Thursday was no different in any visible way. The cafe smelled of ground coffee and warm wood. The late afternoon light came in flat, through the front windows. Sebastian had his coffee, Chloe had her juice and her horses, and the world moved around them at its usual pace, indifferent and unhurried. He noticed the boy almost immediately. It was the posture that caught his attention, the specific, recognizable slump of someone who had been trying to understand something for a long time and was running out of patience with themselves. The boy was small, 8 years old at most, with a neat collared shirt that suggested someone had dressed him carefully that morning. His backpack was pushed against the chair leg. On the table in front of him lay a single worksheet, 3rd grade mathematics, and a pencil that had not moved in several minutes. The boy's name, though Sebastian did not yet know it, was Oliver Bennett. He was 8 years and 4 months old. He had transferred to a new school 11 days ago, and those 11 days had been, in every measurable sense, the worst of his short life. His old school was 20 miles away in a different district, and everyone he had known there, every friend, every familiar hallway, every teacher who knew his name, had vanished overnight, the way things do when adults make decisions that children have no part in making. His new classroom had 23 students who had known each other since kindergarten, and who regarded him with the particular indifference that children reserve for people who arrive without context. He sat at the end of the lunch table. He raised his hand in class and was called on the same number of times as everyone else, which felt, somehow, like its own form of invisibility. At recess, he walked the perimeter of the field and watched the existing friendships operate with the smooth efficiency of long habit. And he thought about his old school, where he had known exactly where to stand and what was funny and who to sit with, and the distance between there and here felt, on bad days, like something that could not be closed. He was doing his homework at a cafe because his mother had a 4 o'clock call she could not move, and the library closed early on Thursdays, and there was nowhere else obvious to be. He had been sitting at the table for 40 minutes. He had completed 2 problems out of 8. The third problem involved multiplication of 2-digit numbers, and something in the carrying of tens had gone wrong in a way he could not identify, and the more he stared at it, the more wrong it seemed. He had, at the 20-minute mark, approached the counter and asked the barista for help. The barista was 19, harried, and working alone during the after-school rush. She had told him, not unkindly, that she was really busy right now. He had returned to his table. At the 30-minute mark, a man at a nearby table had glanced over when Oliver asked if he could help. The man had looked at the worksheet, made a brief expression of regret or apology, said he was terrible at math, and gone back to his phone. Oliver had not asked again after that. He sat with his pencil not moving and looked at the problem and felt the particular, humiliating weight of being stuck in a public place with no one willing to stop for him. Sebastian watched all of this from the corner table. He told himself, in the way that people tell themselves things they do not entirely believe, that it was not his situation to involve himself in. The boy was not in danger. Someone would come. He had his own work to do, and Chloe needed his attention, and he had learned years ago, had been specifically taught, by circumstance, the cost of stepping into problems that were not his to solve. He looked at his laptop screen. He looked at his daughter, who was adding a flowing mane to a brown horse, with great concentration. He looked back at the boy, who had set down his pencil and was pressing the heels of his hands against his eyes in the private, helpless gesture of someone who does not want to cry in public. Sebastian closed his laptop. He picked up his coffee. He walked to the next table and sat down across from Oliver and said quietly, "Which one is giving you trouble?" Oliver lowered his hands. He looked at Sebastian with the caution children develop when adults do unexpected things. Then he pushed the worksheet across the table without saying anything. Sebastian looked at the problem. It took him approximately 4 seconds. He picked up his own pen, he always carried one, a habit from another life, and turned the worksheet sideways and began to explain. Not in the way that people explain things when they want to seem helpful, with sighs and simplified vocabulary, and the faint implication that the listener should have understood sooner. He explained it the way someone explains something they find genuinely interesting, from the mechanics outward, with patience for the question beneath the question, circling back when Oliver's eyes lost focus, adjusting the angle until the shape of the thing became clear. Oliver's pencil started moving. He carried the 10 correctly. He got the answer. He checked it. He looked up. "That's it?" he said. "That's it," Sebastian said. Oliver looked at the worksheet, then back at Sebastian, with the expression of someone reassessing a situation. He picked up his pencil and moved to problem 4. Sebastian stood to go back to his table. Then Oliver said it, not loudly, not theatrically, just as a fact, offered into the air between them, the way children offer facts they haven't yet learned to be careful with. "Mom said no one would help me anymore." Sebastian sat back down. He did not say anything immediately. He had heard the sentence and understood instinctively that it had more than one meaning, that it was not purely about homework, or this cafe, or this afternoon. He set his coffee down on the edge of Oliver's table and looked at the boy carefully. "What did she mean by that?" he asked. His voice was level, not probing, just open. Oliver shrugged, the shrug of someone who has thought about something enough to stop thinking about it. "We moved. She says things are different now, that I have to figure stuff out more on my own." He paused. "She didn't mean it mean. She just said it." Sebastian nodded slowly. He asked where Oliver had moved from. Oliver told him. He asked about the new school. Oliver gave a one-sentence answer that contained, in the compression of a single sentence, the entire experience. Nobody really talks to me there yet. There it was. Sebastian recognized it not abstractly, not with the comfortable empathy of someone who had read about loneliness, but with the specific, bodily recognition of someone who had lived inside it. The new place, the people who already knew each other, the sitting at the edge of things and waiting for a door to open that no one thought to open for you. He said nothing about that. He asked what problem Oliver was on now. Oliver showed him. It was correct. From the corner of his eye, Sebastian noticed Chloe had put down her pencil and was watching Oliver with open curiosity. She slid off her chair, walked the 3 steps to Oliver's table, and placed her current, drawing a particularly ambitious horse, with a braided tail in front of him without preamble. "You can have this one," she said. "I'm going to draw a different one." Oliver looked at the horse, then at Chloe. "I like the tail," he said. "I know," said Chloe, entirely without arrogance, as though this were simply a shared fact. She climbed into the chair beside him and retrieved a fresh napkin. Something shifted in the room, small and imperceptible to most of the people in it. The barista glanced over once. A woman at a table near the window lowered her book. The particular atmosphere of strangers pointedly not acknowledging each other softened by some degree into something warmer. Oliver finished problem 5. He had started to hum, very quietly, under his breath. She arrived at 14 minutes past 5, and the first thing Sebastian noticed was the quality of her silence as she stopped in the doorway. Most people, entering a cafe and scanning for a child, move with some fraction of urgency, a slight forward lean, a quickening of the eyes. This woman was still. She stood in the entrance with her coat over her arm and her phone in one hand, and she took in the full scene in the way that someone who manages large, complicated things takes in a room, completely, once, without visible reaction. Her name was Amelia Carter. She was 28, and she ran a software infrastructure company called Bridgepoint Systems that employed 61 people and had, in the past 18 months, grown faster than anyone, including herself, had anticipated. She had the kind of composure that reads, to strangers, as coldness, the carefully maintained stillness of someone who learned early that visible emotion is a cost, and who had paid that cost so many times that not paying it had become reflex. She was also, though this was not visible from the doorway, exhausted in a way that sleep was not fixing. She saw Oliver. She saw the drawing on the table, the completed worksheet, the slight ease in his posture that had not been there when she dropped him off an hour ago. She saw the little girl beside him, focused intently on her napkin. Then she saw Sebastian, and her expression, which had been moving gradually toward something like relief, rearranged itself into something more controlled. She crossed the cafe. Her voice, when she spoke, was precise and not particularly warm. "What's going on here?" Sebastian looked up. He registered her immediately, the quality of attention in her posture, the specific tone of a question that is not exactly a question. He said, calmly, "Your son was having trouble with the multiplication unit. We worked through it." Her eyes moved to Oliver, who had sensed the change in atmosphere and gone still. Then back to Sebastian. "I don't know you," she said. "No," Sebastian agreed. "Oliver, come here." Oliver stood up. He looked at Sebastian, then at Chloe, then at his mother. "He helped me, Mom, with the homework," I asked, and he helped. Amelia looked at her son for a moment. Then she looked at the worksheet on the table, at the pencil work, at the fact that 8 problems were now solved correctly. A beat passed. Around them, the cafe had gone slightly more attentive, 1 or 2 people who had been idly aware of the corner all afternoon now watching openly. "Where's Chloe's drawing?" Oliver asked, looking around for the horse. He had slid it carefully inside his math folder. Sebastian said nothing. He waited. He was very good at waiting. The sharpness in Amelia's posture did not disappear, but it reorganized. She pulled out the chair across from Sebastian and sat down. She placed her phone face down on the table. It was the gesture of someone deciding, consciously, to be present. "I'm sorry," she said. It came out precisely, without ornamentation. I came in hot. You startled me. Understandable, Sebastian said. A stranger sitting with my son in a cafe. I know how it looks, he said. I have one of my own. He tilted his head toward Chloe, who was now explaining something about horse anatomy to Oliver in a tone of absolute authority. Amelia watched them for a moment. Something in the set of her jaw eased by 1 degree. She looked back at Sebastian. Thank you for helping him. It's been a hard few weeks. New school, Sebastian said. She looked at him. He told you that? He mentioned it. She nodded once, absorbing this. Then, because she was someone who organized information by habit, she asked, What do you do? It was a simple question. The kind of question that functions as a handshake between strangers, a method of orientation. Sebastian understood that. He also understood, from the particular way she asked it, the slight additional precision, the brief delay before the final word, that she was using it as more than a handshake. She was filing him, sorting him into a category. He was, he knew, going to be filed incorrectly. I drive, he said. Rideshare. Nights I do warehouse work. She received this without visible reaction. But he noticed almost everything, which was the other edge of the gift. The small recalibration in her expression, not condescension. More like, the information did not fit the preceding data, and she was deciding what to do about the gap. You explained that problem quickly, she said. Most people can't do long multiplication on sight. It wasn't long multiplication, he said. It was carrying tens. Different thing. Her eyes stayed on his face a half-second longer than the comment required. You have a background in math? I have a background in a lot of things, he said, and smiled, and said nothing more. Chloe had moved on from horse anatomy to asking Oliver what his favorite animal was, a survey she conducted with everyone she met. Oliver said a wolf. Chloe considered this gravely and announced that wolves were acceptable but underrated as drawing subjects, and that she would try one. Amelia watched her son laugh, a real laugh, sudden, not the careful laugh he had been producing for the past 11 days, to demonstrate that everything was fine, and some piece of the exhaustion in her face rearranged itself into something less defended. She looked at Sebastian again. There was something different in it now. Not softness, exactly. Recognition, maybe. The look of someone who has placed something they could not place before. What did you do before you drove? She asked. Sebastian picked up his coffee. It had gone cold again. He looked at the cup for a moment. Different things, he said. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It isn't. She waited. He did not fill the silence. He was one of those rare people who did not feel the social pressure to fill silence, which told her something about him, though she was not yet sure what. Across the table, Oliver was drawing something with Chloe guiding his hand the beginning of a wolf, apparently with very large ears. Oliver said something, Amelia said, slowly, feeling her way through it. He said you were smart, like the people at my company. Sebastian looked at her. He said it while you were getting a napkin for Chloe. He didn't mean anything by it. He just said it the way kids say things. She paused, but it landed in a strange way. Because the people at my company, the senior engineers, the architects, they have a way of listening, a way of sitting very still and then speaking at exactly the right moment. You have that. He did not confirm or deny this. He looked at her steadily, without defensiveness or performance. I'm going to ask you something, she said. You don't have to answer. What did you do 5 years ago? The question was specific. Not what did you do before or what's your background. 5 years ago. He registered the precision and set his cup down. Why 5 years? He asked. She pulled out her phone. She turned it over, opened something, and slid it across the table to him. On the screen was a white paper, a technical architecture document, dense with diagrams and notation. The header read, Project Meridian Distributed Systems Audit and Redundancy Framework. She watched him look at it. His face did not change, but he went very still, the specific stillness of someone who has encountered something they were not expecting and is deciding, in real time, what the encounter means. I found this in our legacy files 3 months ago, Amelia said. The original author's name was removed. The document had been anonymized and submitted through a consulting bridge. But whoever wrote it designed a fail-safe architecture that 4 of our core systems still run on. I've had engineers try to reverse engineer the design philosophy for 18 months. She paused. No one's been able to fully replicate the reasoning. Sebastian picked up his coffee again. He did not drink it. He put it back down. We have a problem, Amelia said. A serious one. One of the 3 primary nodes is degrading. We've had our best systems architects on it for 6 weeks. They've identified the symptom. They cannot find the root cause. She looked at him. The day before yesterday, I ran a search on the bridge firm that submitted this document. It had been dissolved, but there was a contractor ID on the original submission. I ran it through a couple of databases. She stopped. Your name came back. The Café moved around them. Chloe was explaining to Oliver the correct way to draw wolf ears, which apparently involved a technique she had invented herself. Someone at the counter ordered a latte. The late afternoon light had gone orange. Sebastian looked at the document on the phone screen for a long moment. Then he looked at Amelia. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet and completely even. I left that world deliberately, he said. I don't want to go back to it. I'm not asking you to go back to it, she said. I'm asking you to look at a problem. Same thing. It isn't. She sat forward slightly. The people who will lose their jobs if this system fails, they're not abstractions. They're 61 people. Some of them have been with me since I had 12 employees and no office. They trusted me. Something moved across her face, brief and unguarded. I don't want to be the person who let them down because I couldn't find the right person to ask. Sebastian was quiet. He looked at Chloe. She had managed, through some combination of instruction and collaboration, to produce with Oliver a wolf of considerable dignity. She was now showing Oliver how to sign his name in the corner, the way her father had taught her to sign her drawings. He looked at the phone on the table. He looked at Amelia. Show me what the symptom looks like, he said. She pulled up a second document, a live system log, cascading lines of diagnostic data. She turned the phone so he could read it. He leaned forward. He read for 40 seconds. He sat back. The cause was there. It was small, a single recursive load-balancing parameter that had been set, presumably by someone following the original architecture's instructions, without fully understanding the reasoning behind them, at a threshold that worked perfectly under normal conditions and would fail catastrophically under a very specific convergence of load spikes. It was the kind of error that would never appear in routine testing. It would only surface under conditions that the original design had specifically anticipated and that no one who had inherited the system had thought to model. It was, Sebastian recognized with the detached familiarity of someone revisiting old handwriting, his error in the sense that he had built the system around a set of assumptions he had documented carefully, but apparently not carefully enough. The assumption was not wrong. The implementation, by someone downstream, had stripped the safety margin he had built in. One number, off by a factor of 4, in a codebase that no one had fully read in 3 years. Sebastian picked up the pen he always carried. He pulled a clean napkin from the dispenser on the table. He wrote on it for perhaps 90 seconds, 3 lines of notation, and a single diagram, compact and exact. He slid it across to Amelia. She looked at it. She looked at it for a long time. That's the root cause, she said. That's the root cause. You got that from a 40-second read of the log. I designed the load logic, he said simply. I knew where to look. Amelia sat with the napkin in her hands. Around her, the cafe continued its ordinary evening. The barista, wiping the counter, a couple near the window splitting a dessert, children drawing wolves. She looked at the notation on the napkin and felt the particular, vertiginous sensation of a problem that had consumed 6 weeks and hundreds of hours of specialized labor resolving itself, on a paper napkin, in a cafe, because a man had stopped to help her son with his homework. Why did you leave? She asked. It was quieter now. Not a professional question. A real one. Sebastian was silent for a moment. When he answered, his voice was low, unhurried. My wife died. Chloe was 8 months old. I'd been carrying a work life that left no room for anything but work. And suddenly, there was a person who needed all of me, all the time. And I looked at what I was building, and it didn't look worth it anymore. Not the way I'd been doing it. He paused. So I stepped out. I needed to be a father first. Everything else second. Amelia looked at Chloe. The little girl had fallen asleep in Oliver's chair, leaning against her father's jacket, which Sebastian had folded and placed there without anyone noticing. Oliver was adding details to the wolf with focused care. That sounds like the right choice, Amelia said. It was the only choice, Sebastian said. I just didn't know how to make it and stay in that world, so I left the world. A silence settled between them, different from the earlier silences. Not a test, not a negotiation. Just two people at a table at the end of an afternoon. Amelia looked at the napkin again. She placed it flat on the table, very carefully, as though it were something fragile. I want to offer you a position at Bridgepoint, Senior Systems Architect. The salary is... Stop, he said. She stopped. I don't need the number, he said. That's not the question. She waited. I need to be available for Chloe, he said. School hours are school hours. I don't work nights, unless it's genuinely critical, and I need at least 48 hours notice for anything that runs long. I need health insurance that covers pediatric care. And I need... He paused. He looked at Oliver, who was now showing Chloe's sleeping form